Welcome to the Reflective Leader podcast, where we hold up a mirror and explore how we live, how we lead, and who we're becoming along the way. I'm your host, Krista Johnson. As the start of 2026 unfolds, I've been noticing the familiar new year, new me convos, and social media posts just swirling around. And the new year just has this way of inviting reflection and possibility. And I've been in that reflection myself lately. I've been paying attention to what feels important and what I want to be more intentional about as I step into this next season and throughout this year. And as I promised you in the very first episode of this podcast, when a topic feels timely or alive for me, that's usually a sign it's something worth talking about here. So today, I want to talk about one of the tools I return to again and again when I'm thinking about goals, about growth, and about the future. And that tool is visualization. Not visualization as wishful thinking or something separate from action, but visualization as a way of aligning the mind, the body, and the spirit with what we really want to create in our lives. And here's the part I really want to let you in on, the part that, in my experience, unlocks the true power of visualization. It's emotion. Today, we're going to explore what happens when visualization is paired with feeling, when we don't just see what we want, but we allow ourselves to feel the joy, the gratitude, and the embodied sense of it as if it's already ours. Because when visualization is connected to emotion, we can move from imagining our future to really living it. So before we go any further into this podcast, I want to level set on what I mean when I say visualization, because it really can mean many different things to many different people. So what is visualization? At its core, visualization is the practice of mentally rehearsing a future experience before it happens. It's the act of imagining something so vividly that the mind and the body begin to register it as familiar. And this is the important part. Visualization isn't about fantasy. It's about rehearsal. This is why it's been used forever by athletes, performers, surgeons, and military teams. Olympic athletes visualize races before they ever step onto the track. Gymnasts will run through their routines in their minds. Basketball players will visualize their free throws. Surgeons mentally rehearse procedures that they have to perform before they ever even enter the operating room. They aren't doing this to feel inspired or even doing this because they're excited about what's to come, although I'm sure they are. They're doing it to prepare. What they're rehearsing is not just the action itself, but the experience of performing well. The steadiness, the focus, the confidence, the feeling of being in their body and capable in that moment when it matters most. When we vividly imagine an experience, especially when emotion is present, the brain activates many of the same neural pathways as it does during the real thing. The brain doesn't fully distinguish between something that is happening and something that is vividly imagined, which is just so cool about our brains. If you aren't convinced yet about this visualization thing, let me tell you a bit more about the science of visualization and emotion. When we think about goals or plans, we're primarily using the prefrontal cortex. So this is the part of our brain that's responsible for things like logic and planning, reasoning, and even our decision making. It's what allows us to map things out, to set intentions, and to even imagine different possibilities. And that's important work. But thinking alone, of course, it has its limits. Thoughts are largely electrical. They fire quickly, and then they move on just as quickly. This is why we can have clarity in one moment and then kind of feel disconnected from it the next. Or we can understand something intellectually or logically, but we can struggle to put it into practice and even fully live it and create habits. Emotion operates differently. Emotion engages deeper systems in the brain, particularly the limbic system, which is closely tied to things like memory and motivation. Emotion also involves chemical messengers like neurotransmitters and hormones, which means emotional experiences tend to last longer and they leave a stronger imprint. This is why emotion carries weight and signals importance. It tells the nervous system this matters. And when visualization includes emotion, it no longer just stays at the level of an idea or thought. The brain begins to treat the imagined experience as meaningful and relevant. It becomes something the system pays attention to, remembers, and kind of organizes around. When visualization is paired with emotion, the imagined future starts to feel familiar and possible rather than just kind of a distant or an abstract idea. And when something feels familiar and possible, movement toward it can become much more natural. We're no longer relying solely on willpower at that point or even discipline. Our system is oriented toward it. Without emotion, visualization remains something we just think about. But with emotion, visualization becomes rehearsal, like I mentioned. It becomes practice for what we are bringing into our lives, which is why this quote I often use in my coaching practice feels so true to me right now more than ever. You can't think your way to change. You have to feel your way to change. So far in this episode, we've talked about the power of visualization at the level of thought, getting clear on what we want, of course, and naming the future we're moving toward. And we've talked about what happens when we assign emotion to that vision, when we allow ourselves to feel the joy, the gratitude, and the meaning of it as if it's already happening. That combination is so powerful, as I've shared. And if you listen to the first episode of this podcast, you might remember that we talked about the importance of integrating all three centers of intelligence: our thinking, our feeling, and our action. And that this was one of my big lessons over the last decade. When thinking and feeling are aligned, action can then become much more intuitive. We're not forcing ourselves to do things through discipline alone. We're actually responding to something we already feel connected to. Visualization with feeling can help us orient toward the actions then that support the future that we've been imagining. So, in other words, when thinking, feeling, and action are working together, momentum can build in a way that feels steady and sustainable, which is exactly what we want when we talk about real growth and real change. There's one more layer to this that I want to name here because it would feel completely incomplete not to, because it is something that has been meaningful for me. There's another school of thought here around visualization that lives more in, let's say, the metaphysical realm. One that many people will recognize from conversations about manifestation or the law of attraction, or you may have even heard it in pop culture moments like the movie The Secret. The perspective here suggests that when we visualize something clearly and consistently, especially when it's paired with emotion, we don't just change ourselves internally. We begin to attract the experiences and opportunities and people and even the resources that align with what we're holding in mind. For a lot of people, this isn't an abstract theory. It's real, lived, evidenced experience in their lives. Many people can point to moments in their lives where something they visualized, something they hoped for, maybe even prayed for, or just held on to so deeply emotionally, it seemed to find its way to them in ways that they couldn't really fully explain logically. Here, there's a sense of divine timing or serendipity or alignment, but whatever it is, it can almost feel magical. That belief is real for many people, and many people have seen it work in their lives. Now, you might fully subscribe to this way of thinking, this kind of law of attraction way of thinking, or you may feel a little less woo-woo and want things grounded in more neuroscience and behavior. What I find interesting is that regardless of where you land on this spectrum, the conclusion is surprisingly similar. Whether you believe visualization attracts outcomes through energetic alignment or through changes in attention, perception, or behavior, the evidence points in the same direction. Visualization has power. When we hold a clear vision, we return to it consistently, and we pair it with emotion, something shifts in us or in the world around us, or maybe. We notice different things. We make different choices. We maybe say yes to opportunities we may have missed before. We move differently through the world. We don't have to know how it works for it to work. We just have to be willing to engage in the practice. So whether you think of this as manifestation, law of attraction, or maybe you see it more as nervous system priming, or simply focused intention paired with aligned action, the invitation is the same. Be intentional about what you're holding in your mind. Be mindful of what you're emotionally rehearsing, and pay attention to what begins to meet you along the way. I want to make this really practical and real. So I want to share how I personally work with visualization in my own life. So for many years, I used vision boards. I have been a huge fan of vision boards, and I still love them. In fact, I have the last 4 years of my vision boards sitting in my closet as we speak. They've been really meaningful markers of different seasons of my life, helping me clarify what I was moving toward and giving me a visual blueprint. This year, I decided to try something a little different, a little more portable. I have a lot of travel on the horizon, and I wanted something that could come with me everywhere. So I created a note in my phone titled 2026 Vision. In that note, I wrote out a long list of what I want to feel and experience and achieve in 2026. I am an Enneagram 3 after all, so if you know, you know. But on this list, they are not just outcomes, they are states of being. How I want my life to feel as I move through this year. Some of what is on that list is physical, like building more muscle and feeling really strong in my body. Some of it is experiential, like traveling to the Bay Area in March for one of my best friend's 40th birthdays. And some of it is about how I want to feel in my relationship, my work, and my day-to-day life. Each morning after I do breath work and while I'm drinking my coffee, I open that note and I move through it slowly. So I'm moving through it one line at a time. I read each line and allow myself to feel what I will feel when it's already true. For example, when I read, in 2026, I will have built more muscle and feel strong. In that moment, I feel gratitude for my body and everything it has carried me through up until this point and everything it'll carry me through. I imagine the act of lifting something heavy and feeling really capable and steady. And almost every time I catch myself smiling when I read these lines because there's an expectancy there, not urgency, not pressure, just a quiet knowing that what I want is already mine. And this practice, it's not just personal, it's actually very deeply professional for me as well. So in my work, I'm operating inside a large corporate system that is having significant change and uncertainty in this season. And rather than just visualizing outcomes or milestones associated with my work, I've been visualizing how I want to show up as a leader inside that uncertainty. So I'll picture myself walking into a meeting with grounding and being steady. I will imagine myself listening fully in a conversation and showing up with compassion and confidence with my team, even when maybe I don't have that full idea formed yet. For myself, I'm living that steadiness. And in those moments, I can step into that steadiness by the time it's real. I can walk into that room and it already feels familiar. So if you're someone who uses a vision board instead, the practice is really similar. Rather than just glancing at the images, pause with one image at a time. Let yourself really look at it. Hold it in your mind what that image represents to you and for your life. Think about what it would mean to have that experience, that feeling, that thing already here. Then allow yourself to lean into the emotion associated with it. Joy, relief, pride, gratitude, especially gratitude. Not gratitude for something you hope will happen, but gratitude as if it already belongs to you. That emotional step is what brings the image to life. And I do this with each item on my list. So I'm not asking myself how it's going to happen in the moment. I'm not problem solving or planning it or action steps. I'm just allowing myself to emotionally rehearse the experience of having that thing I want so badly. That's the daily practice. And although that daily practice is so powerful for so many reasons, I feel that on its own, it isn't enough. Aligned action still matters. I still have to show up and do my workouts with my trainer, Angie, to be strong. I still have to book the flights to San Francisco for my bestie's birthday. I still have to walk into meetings with strength and calmness and clarity and compassion. Those steps don't disappear just because I visualized myself in them. but visualization prepares me for action in a way that feels really supportive rather than forceful. The act of naming what's important, returning to it consistently, and pairing it with emotion and gratitude, it's like it primes me. It gets me into the right internal state to take aligned action. It shapes what I notice. It influences the choices I make. It opens me up to people and opportunities and resources, like I mentioned, that support what I want to do, how I want to feel, and what I want to achieve. So instead of relying on discipline alone, I find myself moving with more clarity and intention toward the things I really want. Action at that point can feel like a natural extension of what we've already been rehearsing internally. And that's where that real power of visualization lives. So as we move further into 2026, my hope is that this conversation invites you to relate to your goals a little differently. Not as something that you're chasing or fixing or forcing, but as something you're already in relationship with. In this episode, we've talked about visualization as more than imagination. We've explored how emotion gives it depth and staying power. We've looked at how thinking, feeling, and action work best when they're aligned. And we've named that whether you approach this from a leadership lens, a scientific lens, or maybe a little bit more of a metaphysical lens, the invitation is consistent. You don't have to get it perfect. You don't have to know exactly how everything will unfold. You just have to keep returning to what matters and practice feeling into it with honesty and care. Because when we stop trying to think our way into change and we allow ourselves to feel our way there, something begins to shift, and you'll feel it when it shifts. Action feels clearer. Choices feel more aligned. And the future you're moving toward starts to feel familiar and reachable and real. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending this time reflecting with me. Until next time.